Hello there. Welcome to The 30. This is Patrick on another Thursday. Thank you for joining us. It's nice and sunny outside. Appreciate you. On this day, we are streaming live. Once again, you can check us on Facebook or on YouTube Live. If you miss us live, you can watch us on replay. Tonight, we continue with our Moving Forward series. Do me a favor, if you can, please go ahead and a huge favor, go ahead and share this broadcast with your friends, or like our broadcasts, or send a comment. We want to hear from you. So go ahead as we go through this broadcast, send us your comments or your questions. For you, last week, we started this series on moving forward. This is part 2 of the 30. The goal of the 30 is to basically bring awareness and give you the necessary information that you'll need to help you personally, professionally, and spiritually. My commitment to you each Thursday is that we will have an engaging and exciting and informational broadcast. So that is my commitment to you. Last week, we started with a topic on racism and racial inequalities. And last week, my guest was Mark Rennie, and we spoke extensively about that and his experience. This week, I have another friend of mine, a young man, and he's going to come in and he's going to speak to us about his own experiences. He is a counselor. And he's going to come from that perspective. He's also saved, so he's going to come from that perspective. But I'm sure it's going to be an enlightening and exciting and very informational experience for the next 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to bring him right in. His name is Jarid Cheatham, and he's our special guest for tonight. Hello, Jarid.
Hey, Patrick.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you. Hey, thank you for joining us, for taking the time this evening. I know you could have had many other things to do, but you took the time to join us to conversate about some very important topics, racism and racial inequalities. So let's get started as we always do. Let's talk about who you are. So tell the audience who you are, what you do. Give us a brief background of Jarid.
Okay. My name is Jarid Cheatham. I live in Rochester, New York. I'm married as of July 2018, so almost 2 years. My wife's name is Abigail. Right now we're living in East Irondequoit. I work as a social worker for Webster Central School District. I work in an elementary school with kindergartners through 5th grade. Some of my education background, I went to Brockport. I moved from Long Island up to Brockport to go to the college at Brockport. I did my undergraduate in health science with a major in alcohol and substance abuse counseling. Straight from undergrad, I was hired as a substance abuse counselor in the city of Rochester. I worked for Baden Street Settlement. It's on the corner of Joseph and Clinton Avenue in Rochester. So I worked there for about four and a half years. While I was working full time, I went back to school for my master's in social work. I did that part time. I was able to finish in 3 years. Right from my master's program, I was hired through the school district. So I transitioned from substance abuse counseling to doing therapy with children who have special needs. So,
awesome. So you've done a lot, Jarid. You've done quite a bit as a young man. We do share things in common. I moved from New York City to go to school in Brockport, so we do share that in common. Tell us something about. We had a brief conversation. I think it was yesterday, Jarid. And this came about from a post that was shared by our friend Mark Rennie. We have him in common. And it was a conversation that you had with your senior pastor, Pastor Brad. and the church is Christ Community Church in Brockport.
Yep.
So give us some idea of that conversation and how it came about, and give us some background.
So back in January, I had approached Pastor Brad about doing something a little bit different for Black History Month. We go to a predominantly white church. Most of the attendants are white. And I've been going to this church. So I found this church back in about 2011, 2012. So I've been going for about 8 years. I've made wonderful connections. I have amazing friends, and they have truly represented a family to me. And it's been amazing. 8 years in any arena, you really grow to know and to love and appreciate the relationships that you have with people. So with this in mind, I knew that if I were to speak on the issues that Black Americans still face, and that we would make that Black History Month a little bit different when we would talk about not just the past, but we talk about what's going on now, some of the continued struggles that Black women and Black men still have. I wanted to make it personal, so I spoke about some of the issues that I have seen, some of the issues that I have faced, and what I still see going on. And I also added a challenge to the congregation that we would commit ourselves to praying, to caring, and to being aware about the issues that are still going on. So fast forward, we get into March, and there was a story about Ahmaud Arbery, a young Black man. He was running in his community, and three racist white men chased him down and killed him. That hit me to my soul. I felt that very deeply because he was 25, I'm 27. He loves to run, I love to run, and I just saw so much in common. He is Black, I'm Black, and just there was a sense of, this, something needs to happen. So we get into our groove of doing our Sunday streams live because we're in quarantine and we weren't having live services. And that stream on that Sunday, the following Sunday after this story went viral, nothing was brought up. No one talked about anything. No one said anything. And it was a very awkward silence. It was a very painful silence for me, knowing what had happened and seeing that there was no response from anyone. I felt alone. I felt isolated. I felt angry. And instead of holding those feelings in, my wife encouraged me to go to my pastor and talk to him. So in March, Pastor Brad and I began to have this real conversation about how that silence had affected me, why this is important. And I really just shared my heart with him. And at that time, he was nothing but apologetic that this happened. He was committed and repentant and saying that it's not that I just feel bad, but we're going to do something to make a change. And I'm making a commitment to you, to grieve with you, to walk with you, and to come alongside me in this so that I never feel alone in this fight or alone in this struggle again, which is very significant that he is a white man who has not experienced the things that I've experienced. I have not experienced the things that he's experienced, but we came together in that moment. And there was a true commitment, a true friendship, or another layer to our friendship that has been growing through this. So March was a very hard time in the Black community. There was Ahmaud Arbery, there was Breonna Taylor, there was a situation in Central Park with Amy Cooper. And if you're not aware of these might just sound like names. I would encourage you to go dig into doing the research to figure out these stories if you have not been made aware. And then finally, there was George Floyd. At that time, all of the pressure, all of the weight, everything came down, and you try to maintain a positive attitude. You try to maintain, we're going to get through this. But to see this happen to a Black man, innocently killed, I was so distraught. And I didn't feel like I had anybody who I could really count on to be from the outside and come into my problem. And Brad was there. I didn't have to reach out to him. I didn't have to tell him, hey, this happened. I think we should pray about it. A true commitment kicked in because he understood. He knew while he was reading that headline that, oh my goodness, Jarid must be deeply affected. Jarid must be deeply grieving. Jarid must be deeply hurt. And it wasn't just a sense of pity. There was a sense of, we need to come together. I don't have the answers, but we need to come together because two are stronger than one.
Mm-hmm.
And he helped me just to have someone to vent and to lay this on, someone that cares for me, somebody that I care about, and somebody who I knew was with me for the long haul and with me for the long run. So we decided that this could not be something that we just keep between ourselves. This was something that needed to be shared. And in the midst of everything that's going on with silence being a hot topic, a lot of people are going about ways to figure out how to break silence, how to form a message or form a hashtag or form a statement to break silence, to see if there's an awareness about what's been going on. I was really, really just amazed that we were able to come together, and maybe not on a global or a national level, but we were at least able to do that in our church.
That's great.
Yeah.
So one step at a time, right? One brick at a time in terms of laying those layers for restoration and reconciliation. That's great, Jarid. What has been the response from others so far since you had that conversation with Pastor Brad?
Well, I added some practical action steps in that message about things that we can do in terms of addressing oppression and injustice, because racism is a matter of the heart, and there needs to be a spiritual and just an awareness and an awakening in an individual who has been emotionally, mentally, and spiritually attached to a lie that they are superior and that someone else is inferior, and that there's a hatred and a bitterness in between that person and a entire group of people. That is a matter of the heart. And my step to addressing that was by speaking truth.
Sure.
In order to address injustice and oppression, I began to talk about policies and how the policies in our country, the policies in our society have always been slanted, have always been oppressive to Black people. Jim Crow never ended. And I began to talk about some of the ways that we can put pressure on our politicians, our legislators at a state and local level. I sent out a template of a letter that I had challenged some of the candidates that are running in my district to get involved, to not sit on the sideline. And I gave them a specific challenge about what we are seeking in terms of ending police brutality. Again, one brick in a big wall, but one step at a time.
Sure.
So whenever there's communication, there's a sender, a receiver, and a person or a feedback group. We sent it. I know it was received. I did get some feedback. Some people asked me about, can you send this letter to me as a template so I can begin to do some of these things as well? Thank yous. But there wasn't, I'll be honest, there wasn't as much feedback as I would have thought.
Sure.
As I would have liked. Yeah.
And it's challenging, right, Jarid? Because you're asking individuals that really never thought about it, or maybe they've thought about it, but sometimes change for people can be very tough. And from you yourself as a young man wanting to do things, a sign of a leader, right? And sometimes leaders have to make the tough decisions in order to move forward, but also be persistent and never giving up. And for some people, they feel most comfortable just sitting at the sidelines and don't want to rock the boat, don't want to get involved, because it can be fearful. It can be fear where they may say something that they feel may offend. So at this point in time, we're going through some of those, especially from those that may be older than you are. But you sit in you have a very different and unique look, Jarid, in terms of a look in. As a Black man, you go to a predominantly white church. You teach or you counsel at a predominantly white school. And here you are, you're charged with leadership. How do you fit into those two worlds as a Black man?
So, just to add a quick point to the feedback, when I said a sender, a receiver, and a feedback is in a feedback group is important in any successful stream of communication. The feedback I was looking for was not just to say, yes, I agree. The feedback I wanted was, I'm struggling to see this because I feel angry about this. I feel hurt about this. How do you make sense of this? And how do you make sense of that? Because those things that might seem, you don't have to agree with everything.
Sure.
And sometimes if you disagree, it's not good to hold those things in, because the only way for things to really become progressive is for two opposing viewpoints to come together as one. And that's what I was
discussion.
So I did get the feedback from the group that agreed, but I know and I believe that there is a group out there of people, of individuals who they don't agree. And I need to know why. I don't want to challenge you. I don't want to shame you. I just need to know why, so that we can have that conversation, or what you need additional to understand. So that is that. But to talk about how I've been a Black professional, a Black man of God, a Black man in my society, I think I've been fortunate. I've been blessed to be able to understand that I'm in a place where I can see both sides. And I really do have a bird's eye view, and I don't feel detached at all. Good. If I'm working in a setting where there's all white people, I don't feel like I'm fraudulent. I don't feel disconnected, and my heart is 100% in it. If I'm surrounded with Black people and my brothers and my sisters, minorities, I don't feel detached. I don't feel fraudulent. My heart is 100% connected. And I think having that true sense of self, having that true sense of connection, I carry it into both arenas. And I think about, okay, how does this affect other people? What is a stumbling block to the other side? What is lacking? And I always try to be aware and cognizant that I know where I'm from. I know who I am. I know what my experiences are. But those need to shape and help me to love and to connect to other people in a way that's meaningful. I can bridge a gap, even if it's just communicating something in a way that someone might not receive it from a person who does not look like them.
Sure.
Being able to communicate something in an honest way that I know is effective has always been, I think, a responsibility. There's a level of responsibility that I know if I don't feel, it won't be filled. Not to say that I have a superhero complex or savior complex, but I know that there's gaps between the Black community, the white community, and in our society, and that there's people who have positions, there's people who have experiences that are like me, that I think they are standing in gaps and they are bridging and making connections as well. And that's just a sense of responsibility that you have when God has blessed you, and God has gifted you in the way that He has gifted me.
Great. So you are under assignment. That's what we call it, right? You have an assignment, and we shouldn't take lightly of your assignment. I'm talking to Jarid Cheatham, and we are continuing the conversation of moving forward, a conversation on race and racial inequalities. So to continue, Jarid, sometimes we hear, and you're young enough, we hear that, especially with young Black men, that parents have to have the talk, right? The talk. And the talk is when you go out and you see a police officer and they speak with with you that you have to be in a certain way. Did your parents in Long Island, did they have to talk with you?
So I want to honor my parents as best as I can, because
Sure.
I know it wasn't just a talk, and I kind of don't really agree with that concept, because it's not just a talk, it's a walk. It's a process, and you can't just give someone one piece of advice and say, okay, now that go fend for yourself. My parents walked us through a walk of love, a walk of awareness, and being open. They grew up in the 70s in the city, in New York City, in Brooklyn. So they were around for, the war on drugs and the war on crime, the crack era, and, the war on drugs, the war on crime. If we want to break that down, it was really a war on Black people and a war on minorities. They have seen police brutality. They have seen police harassment. They lived in areas that were over-enforced, where the law was over-enforced. And they knew the dangers of getting caught up in the criminal system. They've seen the revolving door. They understand mass incarceration, and they wanted to do everything to give myself and my siblings a fighting chance. They never wanted us to ever experience the criminal system, because they understand how that strips your life away. They wanted to do everything to make sure that we had an education to know that we can to learn how to push forward. And they really instilled those, and so that they knew the risks, and they also made us aware of the why. They showed us that, you need to be aware that you are being perceived in a certain way because of your skin color.
Sure.
You're not going to escape that. If you walk into a store, if you walk into a library, if you walk into a bank, you are being perceived as a Black man, and you need to understand that there are stereotypes against you. You need to not fall into those things. You need to be aware of your surroundings. Yes, you might be judged, but never judge back.
That's good. That's good. And those are great words and great lessons. And thank you for sharing that as well, because I think some of those things that we need to continue on and instill in our youth and our young people is that, although you may be judged, but you still have to have love in your heart, because
Absolutely.
Right, it's all about love. Love thy neighbors is love yourself. We still have to love each other, and we still have to live in a world with each other. Yes, we can press on and move on and do the things that we need to be doing to bring about and end racism, but we still have to love each other in terms of the bottom line. Jarid, let's talk about you and what's next. Where do you think we go from here in these dynamics or the situation that we're in? And where do you personally go from here, first and foremost? And then as a society, where do you think we go?
So I think personally, the message is out there, and I'm glad to have been able to play a part in speaking some truth, because I want to see people freed. I don't want to see people living under condemnation. I don't want to see people living under guilt, and letting guilt and shame drive their actions. And unfortunately, at this time in our society, social media seems to be doing an effective job of putting a sense of guilt and responsibility on people that is not an individual. An individual can't do this. A group can't do this. We need to come together as one. So right now, I think what I've been trying to be intentional about is having conversations. If I'm spending time with someone, just talking about the situation that's going on right now, I could compare it to, when you get like a fresh haircut, and you walk into a place and you want your friends to notice, hey, nice haircut. You want your friends to say something, and you kind of feel weird when no one notices your new haircut or your new shirt. It's something that you want to talk about. You want to engage in an open conversation about. But if no one will do it, sometimes you have to draw attention to something yourself. And I think right now I am trying to be more intentional about if I'm with someone, especially if they're white, especially if they're older, just being able to just talk about, how do you feel about what's going on? How do you feel about what I shared? What are your thoughts about this situation? And really, because, it's not always about trying to do something on a macro level. Sometimes you have to bring it down to a micro level, which just means the interactions that you have with peers, families, and on an individual level, those conversations, those relationships matter. That is very important. And I don't want to jump into needing to have a big campaign or a big, display for change, and not simply talking and getting an idea of where people are at. I've been able to talk with my family. I've been able to talk with friends. I'm glad to have put this out there because I think it really did free people to talk to me about these things. And I'm hoping that they will continue to do that in their community. I'm hoping that they will continue to do that in their social circle as well.
I see here there's a comment that someone said, yes.
That's my brother.
Oh, that's your brother. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you do have a supporter there. So Jared, we only have about 3 minutes left. So you said more in terms of yourself. From a society, what role does society have to play in terms of moving this forward, bringing about reconciliation, especially within, let's look at it from the church's perspective. What role do you think the church has to play in this?
If you're angry about something, no matter what side you fall on, if you are angry right now, if you have bitterness, if there is something that you're trying to stuff down and you don't want to talk about, you need to pray over that, because that's the very thing that God needs to deal with in your heart. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter about what it is involved. Right now, if you are dealing with confusion, anger, or bitterness at all, you need to be free of that thing so that God can put love in your heart. God can put love in your heart to the ability to receive love, and that you can push forward and make a difference. We are all hurt. We're all angry. We're all grieving. Our society does a good job of turning that into a competition. You need to understand when you've done your work and your work is done, you need to sit down, you need to be quiet, and you need to receive. Because if God has something for you, it's not just for social media. It's not just for your timeline. It's for you as an individual to make a difference. I think that we all need to find some things that we can agree on at this time, and really, really struggle and push to talk. We cannot continue to polarize where you have one view, one people who hold this view and another people who hold this view. And there's just this tension. I'm really praying that tension breaks. And if it's going to break, it's going to be through individuals. It's going to be through individual conversations. It's not going to be through social media. I don't think we're going to sway any minds through social media, because that's just the way we are. The internet has its own way of keeping us only exposed to what we know and what we believe already, and not being able to accept anything different from someone else. I'm hoping that people will do the work in their heart to accept something from someone else. I'm hoping that God would do the work in someone's heart to accept a different idea from someone else, and to know that you're not to blame. If you are ashamed, I pray that God would take that shame off of you. And I think this really goes back to slavery and never dealing with the sin and the shame of what was done to us as a whole. And I'm just hoping right now that there's just a lot that will come up to the surface in our own hearts that Black and white people have, because we are so different, Black and white people. My wife is white, and it's amazing to have a Black family and a white family, and just knowing how different we are, And that is not a bad thing. Difference is not bad. My pastor spent so much time during our premarital counseling explaining that learn to celebrate your differences. Learn to appreciate your differences. And we're different for a reason. It's a beautiful thing. And those should be celebrated, valued, and we can learn to appreciate each other more and more as we build relationships and have open, honest, and clear communication.
Good. Awesome, Jared. This has been great. I hope our viewers see it as beneficial because, again, it's all about having a conversation with each other, understanding each other, appreciating where we come from, and a willingness to move forward. And that's what the show is all about. This series is all about is moving forward. So, Jared, I want to thank you for your time. It was relevant. I appreciate your insight. And I'll be following up with you to see how things are progressing. All right.
Awesome.
So you have a good night. Okay. Thank you. So we just want to thank you guys for watching another Thursday. Great, insightful conversation from a young man who sees things, but not only sees it, but he addresses it and encourages others to do the same thing. So I want to thank you, the viewer, for being here. You have been tremendous over the last 2 months. So as we continue our conversation on what is going on here and around the world. Next week, we will have probably the final piece of the series. I'm looking forward to next week because we have a great show lineup for next week. You don't want to miss this. This is going to be, we'll speak to 2 to 3 very young people that are moving this piece forward in terms of moving a conversation, bringing awareness, and changing hearts and minds. So again, thank you so very much. Our goal here is to bring awareness through conversation so that we can all reconcile and that we can be restored and move forward as one group, one community, one world. It's all about loving each other and appreciating each other. So until we meet again, as I say, good night, and may God bless you and your family. See you next time.